Okay, so hi everyone. It is 3:30, which for most of our audience, Kirsty, I reckon one of two things has just happened. They have either poured themselves a glass of wine because school is actually out,
Mm-hmm.
or if they are like
Oh, yeah.
us, they have poured a cup of coffee because school
The
is out
coffee
and work has begun.
and work has
You,
started. Yeah, that's where we're
yes,
at.
I am officially welcoming Kirsty to my couch this afternoon in the virtual land. Welcome to the couch, Kirsty.
Oh, thanks for having me. Thanks for having me.
So,
I'm excited to be here.
yes, it is so nice to be able to chat like this. We often don't sit down in the club and chat like this because we're too busy, so it's kind of nice.
It is. It is quite nice. I'm just trying to adjust my camera, but you'll have to have me on the side angle. It's my best
That's all
angle.
right. As long as it's a good side, we're good. So
Yeah, for the most part.
I introduced myself to a lot of our Facebook page yesterday, but I'll do a quick intro again. So for those of you who don't know, my name's Corinne Phillips. I'm one of the group fitness instructors at Fernwood, Campbelltown, and the team leader for group fitness and membership as well. And the lovely Kirsty that I just invited onto the couch or welcomed onto the couch. Many of you know as our fearless Fit 30 team leader, coach and PT, but I wanted you to tell our Facebook 30s a little bit about yourself because you are super qualified in the world of fitness. So tell us a little bit about your qualifications, the studies that you're doing, what you're working on, where are you at, where are you been?
Okay, all right. We'll take it from the top. Started with obviously the TAFE pathway. So went through my Cert 3, Cert 4, and my diploma in fitness. Then kind of graduated from there, going on to do some personal training, found a love for it, went on to uni, did my sport and exercise science degree, loved that, found a passion for working with pregnant populations specifically. So started my Masters of Research, which is looking at exercise testing in pregnant populations. I've got some qualifications around pregnancy and exercise and various other kind of bits and pieces with personal training. But yeah, so Cert 3, Cert 4, diploma in fitness, Bachelor of Sport and Exercise Science, and in my second and final year of my Masters of Research. Woo!
Woohoo! What a list.
What a list. Add that to mum extraordinaire.
Yes, mum extraordinaire indeed. And I'm always we sit next to each other in the office, so I'm always hoping that some of your knowledge will just like magically download into my brain.
Put it into the atmosphere and it'll absorb in.
Yeah. So I'm often looking to Kirsty for information and advice when we're sitting next to each other in the office. But today we are all about HIIT. So we wanted to have a chat about HIIT training. Many of you would know, so I'm a MetaFit coach. So MetaFit is a form of HIIT training that we do in the club. And we obviously do Fit 30 as well, which is a completely different style of HIIT training. But I also know how many misconceptions there are about HIIT training. It became like a real buzzword a few years back, and everyone was labeling everything as HIIT. So I really want to bust some of the myths about HIIT and get some information out there about what HIIT is, what are the benefits, who should do HIIT training. So let's start right at the top and talk about what is HIIT training.
Well, look, I suppose HIIT can be kind of a very broad range of training, but really it's looking at aspects of really high intensity intervals within that training program, but there's generally a lot of rest. So for instance, in a 30-minute session from head to tail, it's really only 10 minutes of really fast, high, maximal work, and then the rest of it's kind of interspread with rest. So that's generally what the HIIT principle is. You work absolutely maximally and you get more rest to recover so that the next time the next bout comes around, you are working maximally. So that's the idea behind HIIT. It's not a submaximal thing where you leave a little bit in the tank. You're expected to be spent at the end of each short burst. And those bursts can be somewhere between 10 seconds to 30 seconds to 60 seconds. They don't typically go beyond 60 seconds, only because from that point on, your anaerobic pathway is a bit depleted. So you can't give maximal, but some people do take it a little bit longer.
Yeah, and I think that's the thing that people get confused about is probably the intervals. How long should the intervals be? And I think you sort of hit the nail on the head there. There's no specific amount, but it should be a period of time that you can hold a maximal effort for.
Absolutely, absolutely. And when you're looking at zones for HIIT, you really are looking, and I'll always pull information from the ACSM, which is kind of the guideline or the Bible for exercise prescription. And they really rank your vigorous heart rate ranges as above 77% of your maximum heart rate. And your rate of perceived exertion, which you'll hear me talk about quite a lot, referred to as your RPE, somewhere between 14 and 17. And that's just for vigorous. And then sometimes when we talk about HIIT, we talk about maximal or near maximal, and then you're looking at a very high range, like above 96% of your maximum heart rate, or 18 out of 20 on your RPE. So you're really completely spent by the end of that.
Yeah, and I think we'll go into a little bit more detail in a little while about what that RPE should really feel like, because I know a lot of us in the club, we use MyZone and Team Beats, so we have devices to tell us when we're in that zone, but we'll talk a little bit later about what that should feel like if you're not using a heart rate monitor. So how are some of the different ways that you can use HIIT training? Because I guess in general population, the perception is that HIIT training is for cardio and is for cardio only. So let's have a chat about that, about how we can use HIIT training and what is it meant for?
Okay. Well, I suppose like most things, the way you program will be how you get your benefits. Yes, it can be done for cardio. It's been shown to improve your VO2 max and your aerobic performance quite well with cardio alone. You can do it for strength style training, but it's probably interesting to some of the research gives you two kind of aspects of strength style training. So one being that you do all of your strength work and then you finish with a HIIT session. And the other one being more like what you would see in a group fitness session or a Fit 30 session, where you do something really hard and then you do something that's probably moderately hard when we're talking about weights, and then you interspread 60 seconds of really hard cardio work. Of the two of those, the latter, which is the multimodal, is the most effective. So when we talk about concurrent training, meaning you do the strength and then the cardio, what they have kind of recorded is that sometimes, not so much for the upper body, but for the lower body, it does really depend on the kind of cardio that you do. So if you were to look at, say, a bike or a treadmill, with a bike not being weight bearing, if you don't have the gear up high enough, you may lose some of the strength benefits. But then when we look at the multimodal portion of it, where we kind of put it all together and move through it throughout the whole session, it doesn't matter. Strength gains will be had in the upper and lower body just as much. So it can be used for strength. It can improve strength. It can improve anaerobic performance, and it can definitely improve aerobic performance. So it can be used for both. Just depends on how you program.
Yeah. And I guess the thing is,
I've lost you.
Would depend on your goals, right? So obviously you're not going to... Have I lost you there, Kirsty, or are you still with me?
100%.
Okay, good. You're still with me.
Just for a little bit.
So it comes back to the goals. So obviously, if you're not interested in strength for whatever reason, if that's not in your goals at the moment, you're not going to focus on HIIT training for strength in the same way that you would focus on the cardio. And if cardio is not the goal that you wish to obtain out of your HIIT training, then you're not going to do it as a cardio session, right?
Yeah, so does come down to programming. If strength is your primary objective, then feel free to do it in the concurrent fashion. But just bear in mind that when it comes to doing the HIIT at the end, you're best to be on weight-bearing type cardio exercises to get that heart rate up. So you're running, things like that. The mixed methods or the multimodal appears to be the best. If you're looking at cardio only, it's always best to keep your strength up as well, because that will help with your power, which means you can go faster.
Yep.
But it really does depend. For the most part, when you're looking at your goals, it's probably best to sit down with someone, one of the personal trainers, and say, listen, this is my goal. I'm looking at strength, or I'm looking at endurance, or I'm looking at power, or I'm just simply looking at cardiovascular fitness, or I'm looking to merge them all, and let them really nut it out with you.
And the multimodal is typically what we do in the club with Fit 30, just so that they have a full picture. Yeah. So that's our small group personal training sessions, functional movements, 30 minutes. That's what we're doing in those sessions.
Yeah, that's the one. So what we typically would do in Fit 30 is we have kind of that harder weight. So the multimodal works on the principles of doing, say, something for strength for 4 to 6 reps, and then something more accessory orientated for 10 to 12, and then going into that max effort cardio sprint and just moving through that over and over again within the circuit. So that's definitely in the Fit 30 structure.
Yeah.
And other classes.
We have touched on, I guess, the benefits a little bit, but what are the benefits of strength training, and HIIT training, and what are the effects on the body?
Okay. So I suppose it depends on what you're looking for, and we have a couple of different things that we can talk about. So I'm just going to bring up a list so I don't forget any. So some of the benefits, really, when we're talking about from the cardiovascular perspective, we're looking at like your aerobic parameters, your endurance parameters, how long you can go for, your heart rate responses to the exercise. So obviously as fitness increases, it's not such a stress on the body. We're looking at your anaerobic. So remember we mentioned your anaerobic is really that early stage of exercise, and we want to look at that power. So how much power you can put into that. That's also something that does improve. So that's one of the benefits of HIIT training, is it really stresses that system quite well, and trains, and that system adapts very, very well. But that does also help your endurance. So that's one thing to look at. It's been shown to improve your vascular function. So when we think about our vessels, the vascular function is their ability to dilate and constrict. Obviously, we want them to dilate when we need blood to be distributed around the body, when we need to get it to the muscles. So when your vessels won't dilate, we have a problem. But what we find with the HIIT training and what the research seems to indicate is it does help with that vascular function. So it does kind of improve the ability of the vessels to dilate. So then getting blood to the working muscles. So that's good, obviously from a perspective of health and fitness, but also just health in general. Because you may have heard the closing of the arteries and the vessels is a real problem. So we want to be careful of that. Obviously, there's a weight loss benefit. They have shown that in terms of doing exercise, it's a really time-efficient way to get in that burn. Not everyone has an hour and a half to do endurance style, and that's understandable. But it's proposed that with this style of training, you get in the same level of intensity and stress on the body, but obviously it's in a shorter period. So it's a more time-efficient way of training if you're short on time. I suppose there's weight loss, of course, and I think I've already kind of mentioned that. And then in the older population, they've found that it does help in terms of cognitive function, and it seems to be more about the information processing. And it seems to kind of help with speeding that up as well. And the theory there is more about the vessels in the brain, and they're reacting and they're responding better to exercise, and then there's more blood flow. So those are just some of the benefits aside from your typical strength and power. They work on all of those systems. There is a little bit of information out there that kind of starts to mention that it reduces inflammation. But it's a little bit inconclusive, so I don't want to spend much time on that one.
Yeah, and I know you sent me a little bit of information regarding the equivalent of time spent on endurance training versus HIIT training. And that's probably one of my favorite things. And I think in MetaFit, we refer to it as the afterburn effect. So off the top of my head, I can't remember the statistics, but have you got the statistic off the top of your head?
So it was basically the equivalent to the 10-minute kind of work. So we're talking about the hard work of the HIIT system within a 30-minute session was the equivalent of a 50-meter endurance. So you've got to kind of look at it that way, whereas the 30-minute HIIT encompasses the warm-up, the workout, the rest, the cool down, whereas the 50-minute endurance is just 50 minutes of running. And then you've got the additional warm-up, cool down, and everything else attached to that. So it is a really good way to do it.
That's one of my favorite statistics, is that it is fast and really effective. Yeah.
It is. And I think one of the things that is starting to come out now is that it also improves, like most exercise, but it's also shown with this short amount of time to improve your blood profile and improve your insulin sensitivity. So this is your insulin sensitivity in your liver and then the whole body. So it's really about making sure that your muscles unlock the ability to take that glucose in and out of your blood and use it. As we know, obviously sugar spent in the blood leads to bad things like diabetes, and we don't want that. So we want to really move it from the blood into the muscle or into the liver. And it does show that HIIT is responsible for doing that and improving that sensitivity profile. So it kind of attacks it on multiple different areas. It's a really good exercise.
Yeah, it's so incredibly beneficial that it makes me wonder why we aren't doing more of it, maybe.
Absolutely.
With HIIT training, obviously we're talking about those maximal efforts, and it's not HIIT training unless you are in those maximal efforts, and it's not going to give you the same benefits if you're not in the maximal zones. So let's talk about what that should feel like. So we talked earlier about the heart rate percentages and where we should sort of be targeting. But for those who don't wear a heart rate monitor, what does maximal effort feel like? What should the body be doing? What are the signs that we're in maximal effort? Because I think that the perception is that HIIT training is for those who are very fit. But my argument is that it's not about who is fitter or who is fit. It's about working in the maximal zone. So if I'm working next to, Shirley over here, and I'm working at my maximal effort and it feels like a 9.5 out of 10, and she's working at her maximal effort at a 9.5 out of 10, despite our differing fitness levels, we are both doing the same thing.
Yeah, it's relative. It's relative to you. It's not an absolute number. So I think a lot of people get very caught up in what one person can do versus what I can do. And it doesn't mean that you need to be sprinting on the treadmill to reach that exact same zone. So when you're thinking about HIIT training, the things that you want to feel and the sensations that you should sense is obviously your heart rate's going to go up. Your breathing's going to go up. Really, for the HIIT style, the maximal efforts, you shouldn't be able to talk. So if I come to you and I go, Corinne, how are you feeling? And you say, well, Kirsty, I've done better. Then I know that you're not working hard enough. And that's often a trick that I will use with people. So for instance, at the end of a session, if I know someone hasn't been working quite as hard as they could, how hard were you working? Oh, maximally. And then the next session, I ask, during the maximal effort, how are you going? Oh, yeah, can't complain. Then we know we've got a problem. So really there's varying levels of breathlessness that you should feel, but in that maximal zone, you should only be concentrating on breathing. Talking is like you can't even. So coupled with that, you've got sweating. Some people will sweat more than others. So just because Shirley's sweating a bucket load or Corinne's sweating a bucket load, it doesn't mean that if you're not, that you're doing something wrong. So don't worry so much about that. If you don't have access to a heart rate monitor and things like that, then really what you do need to think about are the signs of breathlessness and how fatigued you are after and how long it takes you to recover. If you stop exercising and within 10 seconds you're like, yeah, well, girls, I'm done, great, I can go again, we haven't worked hard enough. So those are the things typically as a trainer that I'll look for when I'm training my girls is, if you can go again right now, and I said it was maximal, and that's less than 60 seconds ago, we haven't gone hard enough. So
and I think the thing to recognize with that is that it's going to be uncomfortable.
Mm-hmm.
And it takes, if you're new to training and new to exercise, it takes a little while for you to be okay in that discomfort.
Absolutely. I think for a lot of people, training in the first instances is becoming familiar with the symptoms of exercise. They're not bad. They're your body trying to work for you. And yes, of course, as your fitness improves, really ideally, they should be staying at the same sort of level. You're just more mentally capable of understanding what those symptoms are. So the quickened breath, the racing heart rate, the sweating, all those general fatigues and feelings and thinkings of, oh, I can't do any more, I need to stop. They're all really general symptoms of exercise. And when you get to that maximal end, obviously they're amplified. And those that have been training for a lot longer have spent some more time with those symptoms and realize, oh, that's just part of it and I'm going to be okay. When you're new to it, it can be a little bit overwhelming. So it really is important to make sure that if you're feeling a little overwhelmed by the symptoms that you're feeling, chat with your personal trainer, chat with someone that's done this kind of training before. No doubt they will tell you, oh, yeah, I felt that. And that's okay.
And I think one of the strategies that we use in our MetaFit classes too is that it's okay to rest if you really feel like you need to rest during that work period. If you are just starting out and if you are unfamiliar with those symptoms, until you take a moment to think, hang on, oh, no, that was just my heart racing because I'm exercising, not because there's a problem there. So I always encourage the ladies, if you really feel like you need to rest, then rest, take a moment, recognize the symptoms, think, and then come in again.
Yeah. And over time, you just build up a little bit of resilience to it and a bit more understanding, and it's not as stressful dealing with the symptoms of it. So you're right. Just if you need to take a minute, if you're feeling like, I don't like this, take a second, evaluate it, and go, can I go some more? Yeah, I think I can. Yeah.
And because we're talking about maximal efforts too, I also give them the advice, particularly if they've been training for quite some time, that obviously we have different fitness levels and regressions and progressions for movements and things. But if they choose, for example, let's talk about squats as a regression, squat jumps being the base move, and then tuck jumps being the progression from that for 3 varying levels of fitness. I always say to my advanced trainers, if you chose tuck jumps to start, and we're doing 30 seconds of tuck jumps, and that's your maximal effort, and you get 20 seconds in and you are so far fatigued that you cannot hold on any longer, I don't want you to regress to a squat jump. I want you to take a moment, breathe, and come back in at the maximal effort.
Yeah. And that's the best thing about HIIT is it's all about having that little bit of rest so that you can enter back in at your maximal level. And say, for instance, in a 20-second interval, they may have in their first round gotten 5, 6, 7, 8 tuck jumps. But then by the time you're 6 rounds in, it's like 4, 5. That's okay because it's still maximal and it's still going to do the same thing, and you're doing it now in the face of fatigue, whereas in the first round you were fresh, but it's still going to give you the same results because it's still that stress it was at the start, even though it's less reps.
Yes, but they wouldn't get the same result if they regressed all the way to squats.
That's right.
Because if they can work maximally at a tuck jump, they can't work maximally at a bodyweight squat.
That's exactly it. And you've really got to look at those symptoms, the heart rate, the RPE, everything at the end of every interval. Because if you regress right the way back, you might be taking yourself out of that zone, and then that's not HIIT training anymore.
Yeah. Well, that was rather in depth. I wasn't expecting you to quite that far in, but it's great. It's awesome. So
Good, I'm glad.
As I said, look, who should be doing HIIT training? Because as I said earlier, the misconception is that HIIT training is if you are already fit.
Yeah. Look, HIIT training can be for anyone. Really what you've got to do is, if you're fresh to it, you're new to it, you haven't done it, you need to start out slowly. Like everything, you should always start gradually, turning up the heat on the pot. Never ever jump straight in and think, yeah, I'll be okay. Because what might happen is, for your first session, you might sit beside Shirley and you might do exactly what she's doing, but Shirley gets up the next day and does whatever she needs to do. And you're bedridden with DOMS for days and days. And we don't want that. So really do take it gradually. Increase, and as you were talking about regressions and base and progressions, start with something easier that you can manage that gets your heart rate up. Because if you're new to it, that regression is going to be the thing that works for you. And it gives you room to move. Like when we buy a bra, we don't buy it at its extended area. We bring it right back in so that when things get a bit bigger, we can take it out. Okay. And it's the same sort of thing. Start low, build your way up, give yourself room for movement. And that means it can be for any fitness level, anywhere you can place, as long as you're getting into those zones. In terms of people that maybe should seek a little bit of clarification on medical clearance before they start, you're more looking at individuals that have a pre-existing medical condition or they're taking medications. The reason that I put that forward is, really any doctor's going to want to know that if you're going to work at high intensities and vigorous training, that you're going to be safe. Yep. Personal trainers simply cannot operate in those ranges with you unless you get that clearance. And it's up to the doctors to give us the assurance that you're going to be okay. We'll look for symptoms. We'll make sure you're okay. But at the end of the day, we can't see inside your body. Also, when you're taking medications, it can change the way that your body reacts to exercise. So, for instance, if you're taking some blood pressure lowering medication, you might be smashing it and working so hard, but your heart rate's just not tipping into that red zone. And I say, Shirley, what's going on? And Shirley says to me, oh, I can't. Then we know that you are spent, but what's happening is the medication is working in the background to keep your heart rate down, to make sure that your blood pressure stays under control. And that works by kind of doing a vasodilate. That's a whole nother story. But at the end of the day, it's the medication that's going to give us a bum steer. And we want to make sure that you're okay. So when you come into this kind of training, if there is a pre-existing medical condition, even if it's minor, always get it checked out. Always make sure that you're going to be okay. If you've got some musculoskeletal injuries, let the trainer know, because there's many, many options that you can do for HIIT. And, if it comes down to, okay, look, I've got a really bad ankle, maybe running won't be for you, but ski erg might, cycling might. We can do multiple things. So with the medical stuff, medical conditions, musculoskeletal conditions, if they're severe enough, you need to go and see your doctor. Get the peace of mind, get the clearance, because if you've got medications working in the background, we need to know. Because otherwise, unfortunately, I might sit there as a trainer and say, well, Shirley, I don't know what's going on. You tell me you're working maximally, your heart rate tells me something else. So it's always good to declare when you're having medications on board. But apart from that, poor Shirley, I know.
Shirley's got a real bashing today.
There'll be a Shirley out there going, what have I done?
Shirley, if you're out there, you're doing a great job.
Yeah, I have to put a disclaimer, like it's purely coincidental that we're talking about a Shirley. But really what we find in the literature, and when you have a bit of a search, they're looking at HIIT training from adolescent all the way up to geriatric. So it can be used across many ages, across many populations. It is used in the clinical population, especially when we're looking at diabetes and cardiovascular disease. More the diabetes about the blood profile and getting the sugar out of the blood, and obviously the cardiovascular disease looking at the function of the vessels. But that sort of stuff is left to getting medical clearance and all those sorts of things. And that's very much in the clinical genre right now. But it's being used because it's effective. So, I had a little laugh with my husband because I said, I'm doing a thing on HIIT. And I was like, HIIT, oh, yeah, what is it good for? But it's good for a lot of things. So
it is good for almost everything.
It's time efficient, it's effective. As long as you're being safe and you're consulting with the professionals, there isn't a reason why you shouldn't do it.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, I'm a massive HIIT fan. I'm all about
yeah, me too. Me too. I love it.
Now I know that when you stand next to me and ask me a question, that really you are checking whether I can speak or not.
I'm showing my cards.
Secret is out.
The secret is out. But for most people, I'll be able to tell anyway, because I'll be able to look at the rate of your breathing as well. So there's no way on earth that you can modify the rate of your breathing as soon as I show up beside you. Yeah. And I'll know if you're hyperventilating on something that's relatively easy for you, just for a show.
There is no fooling you, Kirsty Elliot. There is no fooling you.
I've been around long enough now.
Kirsty, I think that will probably do us in terms of information. We have definitely loaded a lot of information onto the audience today. We're going to try and load some of your references and some more information into the comments. So we'll get that loaded as quickly as we can. And then obviously if you guys have any questions, leave them in the comments. Tell us whether you're drinking wine or coffee this afternoon. Which one is it? If you're lucky enough to be having wine after the school day, good on you. Kirsty and I are going to, actually my cup's nearly finished.
That was the last sip.
We'll get on to our work for the night. And hopefully that encourages some ladies who have not ever tried HIIT to get in there and give it a try. And if you're already doing HIIT, it gives you a bit more of an understanding of why you're doing it and how to do it well.
Absolutely. Don't be intimidated by it. It's a great way to train. You don't have to do it all day, every day, but definitely put it in your weekly schedule, I reckon.
Yeah. And I think the key thing to remember is that your 9.5 out of 10 is the same as my 9.5 out of 10. They feel the same.
Shirley's.
And Shirley's as well.
And Shirley's. Don't forget Shirley.
Oh, poor Shirley. Well, let's sign out. As I say, in the comments, leave us any more questions or anything that you want us to touch base on in the future. We would love to make this a regular session with some of our trainers. So fingers crossed we start hitting.
Fingers.
In a good way.
It's good for something.
Yeah. All right, ladies, that is us signing off. We will see you soon. Afternoon, guys.
Bye. Take care.